Hey, today we're going to talk about making inferences using indirect characterization. Now, what's an inference? An inference is just making reasonable assumptions about someone or something based on some factual knowledge or evidence, whether it's presented in film, in literature, what have you. So, let's take a look at this picture. What can we infer about this person? Well, you might infer that he's scholarly. He's got a lot of books around him. Books are often associated with education, and education is often associated with intelligence. So we might also infer that this person's smart. Looking at the way this person's dressed, he's wearing a suit, very conservative tie, a little, is that a pocket square? We might assume that he's affluent, perhaps, of a higher social class, maybe. You might also look at that suit and the books and the glasses and the way he parts his hair and assume that this person is very stuffy or dull. There's not necessarily right or wrong things to say in terms of inferences, just so long as we can back it up with some hard evidence. Indirect characterization. Now, indirect characterization is when we make inferences or assumptions about a character based on what the author is showing us, but not necessarily telling us. Example of a direct characterization would be if the author said the character was terrifying, scary, whatever. Now, indirect characterization would be if we're presented with a scene where the character's walking down the street and other characters start, quaking in fear and running away. The author might not be telling us that this person is scary, but based on the way other people are reacting, we can infer that this character is very terrifying. The best thing to do is to use the steal chart. It's kind of an easy way to remember this. The steal chart refers to the character's speech, thoughts, effect on others, actions, and looks. You can always tell quite a bit about a character by the way he or she speaks. Simple things. Possibly intelligence. Certainly, you could tell location setting where the person's from. If they speak in a certain dialect or anything like that, you can really kind of get some inferences made about the character's thoughts. We can kind of get the inside scoop on who this character really is and make some other assumptions about the character and inferences about the character. As I used in the previous example, the way other people react to the characters can tell us quite a bit, whether the character is terrifying, whether the character is some very charismatic, sort of interesting person. We could tell that just by the way other people react. Obviously, what a character does reveals a lot about him or her. The character, in the classic stories of the person that stands up to the evil forces, we obviously look at the characters being brave, heroic, courageous, whatever. Obviously, if the characters just sort of run away, we look at them as being cowardly. Looks, we can come to some general conclusions about a character based on the way he or she looks. We don't want to judge a book by a cover too much, but we can make some assumptions. So let's use the steal chart based on a character that we know pretty well. I would assume a lot of people know, I'm not sure. Let's look at the character of Aladdin. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, I apologize for this, but if you've seen the movie, just kind of think about what we know about this character and try to fill out the steal chart. So inferences to make. Speech. Nothing particularly great about the way Aladdin talks. So in terms of we just kind of associate him with like a normal person, but he does talk about kind of heavier issues about social inequality, about why he's born in this social situation. One being he's a person that's poor and has to steal just to survive, and he kind of talks about that, the unfairness of that. So that's kind of a deep thing. I think we can assume, despite the fact that he's not using any highfalutin big words, he's still a pretty smart guy. Thoughts, the same way. We don't get a whole lot inside the character's head, but we kind of see that the character does think about deeper issues. The character always has his mind bent on doing what he would consider to be the right moral thing. Now, the effect on others, everyone seems to like this guy. Jasmine swoons over him. He gets the princess. Everyone, besides the evil Jafar, of course, seems to like him. He befriends the big magical genie. His actions, he seems to, even though he steals, he sort of somewhat justifies the reason he's doing it. So we kind of are still sympathetic towards him. He does take on what he perceives to be the evil forces around him, and obviously stands up to the villain at the end and saves the girl. So we look at him as being our hero. Looks, seems to be a handsome enough guy. I don't know. He's got a patch on his knee, which kind of I think is to signify what social class he comes from. I'm still not quite sure why he has a vest on and no shirt, but I guess that's conversation for another time. Now, inferring meaning. Let's take a look at this 5-second film, and even sometimes in the shortest little clips, we can still get some meaning out of these things. We can start making some inferences. Let's hope that we don't have to deal with a commercial. This is obviously called generational divide. This is just from the website 5secondfilms.com.
What are you doing with that coaster?
It's a CD.
Let's play Frisbee! Yeah!
Okay. Again, very short clip, but there's some things we can sort of infer about this character. Obviously, things we have to think about: what's the key idea being conveyed? I would argue that the key idea is that, we're looking at that generational divide, how the older generation doesn't quite understand the new generation doesn't really understand the old generation. We're looking at that divide through the means of technology and the way we kind of communicate and what our types of entertainment are. So what can we infer by this character based on the setting? Seems to be a pretty normal house, normal guy, normal kids. Seems to be kind of an everyday kind of person. Now, looking at Steele, what inferences can we make about this guy? Speech doesn't really say a lot, so we don't have a lot to go on here. He's obviously in disbelief that his kids don't know what he would consider some basic technology, like a CD, is. So I guess the speech just kind of shows some sort of value about how he feels older. Thoughts, we don't get a whole lot. We don't see any inner dialogue, but we do see some actions, which we'll get to in a second. Effect on others. The kids don't seem to be, that moved by anything he does. So I won't say he has a great effect on others. He seems to be kind of, not that he's not a caring father, but he seems to sort of have that gap between him and his sons. Actions, obviously the only thing he really does is slap his head, showing, obviously he's feeling old, outdated, or feeling maybe times have changed. Looks like, I don't know, I would consider an everyday guy, nothing necessarily remarkable. I think it's just supposed to represent the everyday person. So let's look at inferring meaning through literature. Now I'm going to show you a piece by Jessica Stouffer called Beginning In, which was first published in Granta. Now as I read this, be thinking about the Steele chart. We got a place, we read a lot. We rescued a dog. You worked at a shelter. I was a terrible handyman. My father called friends. We moved to the city. We ordered in. We picked up dry cleaning. We hailed cab after cab. We were promoted. We hardly saw each other. You wouldn't kiss me. You said I was my father. I stood there, half listening, sick of your hoping. You said you weren't angry, just tired. Now let's think about, really looking at this piece, what can we infer about the speaker using the Steele chart? Now kind of pause the video and just take a second to reflect. If possible, jot down some ideas on a notepad or something. Just looking at this very quickly, things I kind of inferred. Obviously speech, no verbal dialogues given. What I'm going to assume is that what we see on the page is the character's sort of inner dialogue or thoughts, and we'll kind of use that to make our inferences. The character's having trouble communicating his experience. The phrases are short and they lack commentary, so I think it's reasonable to infer that the speaker is recalling a painful experience and is having trouble expressing himself. Obviously, the fact that there's so little detail and we're just going point to point to point, you can kind of see how difficult this might be. Effect on others, just based on the way the you reacts in this piece, that the speaker might not be an easy person to live with. That there's obviously some distance created between the you and the speaker in this piece. Action. The speaker does pretty typical things in this. I guess we learned that the speaker's a bad handyman, but that's about as unique a thing as we get. The speaker just seems to move, get a job, get promoted. Very basic everyday things, which I'm going to infer that maybe the speaker is just supposed to symbolize an average, ordinary, everyday person, that the speaker is supposed to not have too many details because it's he, or I think it's a he in this case, is supposed to represent kind of the common man. In the looks, there's nothing really described, so we don't have a lot to base on. We're not sure height, anything like that with this, so no inferences can be made. Now, for an assessment, I would like you to complete a steel chart using the first paragraph from J.D. Salinger's classic, The Catcher in the Rye. You go ahead and pause this and fill out the steel chart on a separate piece of paper, or if your teacher was pretty slick and handed you a pre-made chart, that would be great. But just really think about, what do we know based on this character's speech, thoughts, the effect on others, actions, and looks if we get it. Now, you might not get every single category, but you should be able to get some and be able to make some meaningful conclusions and inferences. All right, thanks a lot. Have a good day.